So listen, in the history of the 6.5, Daniel, you and I have had a very consistent conversation about, hey, things are going to get really interesting when we see business value driven incrementally through quantum. Now, the reality is on any new type of technology, it has to go through a certain process, whether that's 5G that starts with research, whether that's generative AI that started with research 3 or 4 years ago. There was a seminal Google white paper that came out. The same is true for quantum. So we're in this zone of trying to look at what the researchers and scientists are coming up with to give us a better view when there's going to be incremental commercial volume. And you're going to want to pay attention to this. Essentially, IBM and Berkeley came together, did some serious research, and essentially showed that you can show quantum value without getting to the point where you need perfect qubits, okay? Because the foregone conclusion and why people are like, oh, this is 10 years away, is that we need to get the qubits to perfection with fault tolerance. And what IBM and Berkeley showed is that combining error mitigation with over 100 qubit quantum computer, you can show value that cannot be done by today's supercomputer with a CPU and a GPU. Not me, my quantum awesome analyst, Paul Smith-Goodson, has published a Forbes article. I actually did an interview with the head of quantum at IBM, Dr. Jay Gambetta, when I was over in Paris. So I've been sitting on this forever. It's pretty exciting. Check it out. I think quantum is going to be here and adding commercial value before most anybody else thinks. And I think this is more evidence of that.
So, let me ask you, Pat, and, normally I just come in and opine, but for a long time, we kind of have had this thesis, right? It's that quantum is cool, but it's like for 1% of 1% of 1% of the human population that are physicists or, some type of deep engineers that can understand just extraordinary technical prowess. And what's happened is quantum computing has kind of been lost. Remember Chamath Palihapitiya said it's uninvestable?
Uninvestable, yes.
And mostly because the word is utility. And I saw Jay Gambetta quoted in the New York Times saying that that's what this moment is about. This moment is about finding utility. Is that kind of how you see it?
It is. I mean, it solved a physics problem using noisy qubits that a supercomputer can't. And it literally went head to head with it, right? Are we ready to, parse this off and have Salesforce and Oracle Fusion use it tomorrow? No, absolutely not. But what it did show is we didn't need to necessarily overcome having perfect qubits, or what's referred to as fault tolerance out there. So to me, this is an in-between state that most people out there had not considered. Because right now, people are lining up out there. They have either these perfect qubits, right, and like 12, right? So it can't do much. And then you have these very imperfect qubits that are super noisy, and you have thousands, tens of thousands. There was kind of nothing in between. And the approach that IBM had taken, which everybody's like, hey, love what you're doing, IBM, but the quality and the noisiness of what you have out there. And what IBM is doing is they are correcting those qubits farther up the path, which I think is something that people hadn't thought of.
And for a long time, by the way, there was a lot of sort of criticism of superconducting. A lot of the ion trapping companies just said that they would never get the fault tolerance. That was, by the way, I had been somewhat convinced, but at the same time, betting against Google and betting against IBM from a bunch of smaller players, maybe there is a certain amount of experience that we have that would say that those aren't great bets. But remember, Pat, if we we say anything far enough into the future, we can be right. You just got to keep pushing.
Exactly. You just don't put a
Or,
and by the way, Daniel, when I was at AMD and NVIDIA was working with all of these researchers on AI, it looked like a bunch of BS, okay, where GPUs were made to do compute. And when I was at AMD, we had ATI, we were working on it as well. And it looked like the Kobayashi Maru. And then boom, University of Toronto used NVIDIA GPUs to do image classification. Is it a cat? Is it a dog? Is it a human? And then it was like people became believers. We are still waiting for that University of Toronto moment for quantum, but I don't think we're 10 years away. I just don't. 5 years away feels a lot more comfortable for me right now.
there's something that maybe this generative AI boom can be attributed to in terms of making us smarter, and that's the law of diffusion of innovation is being short-circuited. Meaning, what used to take the diffusion of innovation used to take months to years, right, from the earliest adopters to laggards. And now what we're really seeing is, like, would you say that someone that's just trying ChatGPT for the first time today is probably a laggard at this point?
Yeah.
You're lagging. And what I mean is, like, it's just not true. Like, when BlackBerry came into market, there was like a few years by which BlackBerry users would have been considered kind of your early adopters, not like your leading edge, but just early adopters of smartphones. If you had an Apple iPhone in 07, 08, you were an early adopter of the iPhone. And all I'm saying is it took a few years, Pat. I mean, now we're seeing things down to months. Now, an enterprise technology like quantum is going to take longer, but don't bet on the long tail and some of the predictions that it's 5 and 10 years. These breakthroughs are coming faster and faster with less time in between. It's also another moment to just kind of, I think the market grossly undervalues IBM's research. And I know that we've said this a lot, but, they don't value the quantum business at all when you look at the actual price of the stock. And I know that that's not our job, but I always look at that for ground truth. They don't value the research they do in semiconductors, whether it's around 2 nanometer or others. They just haven't found a way to value it. And so I'm hopeful under Arvind Krishna, and I'm hopeful that through whether it's licensing or through the products they're able to build and put into market here, that IBM begins to get credit for some of the really critical technology they've been able to roll into the market.
IBM's doing some great stuff. And the way that they're approaching quantum is as if they've been through every major technology turn and they don't feel like they were getting credit for credit's due.